At a press conference attended by two astronauts who would carry out a mission to travel to outer space, journalists were interviewing them. The Captain MOVVIIE conveyed some messages to his wife and son who were also present at the event. One of the journalists also asked about MOVVIIE's family, but he was silent and suddenly remembered the past with his father. It was the start of his story that helped him to be the man he was. In 1990, when MOVVIIE was a child, he took part in a big celebration in his town. They celebrated the opening of the first and biggest bridge in the town. His father, Howen, was an architect who designed and led the construction of this bridge, and at that time, Howen was the torchbearer in the relay event to inaugurate the bridge. The enthusiasm of the city's residents enlivened the event and made the atmosphere very lively. The bridge was like fresh air for the residents because it would help them to cross the big river. Before Howen went to bring the torch and pass the bridge, MOVVIIE asked him why everyone cheering and calling his father's name. Howen then explained that he had become part of a big change that would help many people, but the happiness didn't last long. Just before Howen passed it, the bridge he had worked hard building suddenly collapsed instantly, and after that, Howen was imprisoned on charges of embezzlement of bridge funds, which made the bridge construction project fail. After being imprisoned for several months, his wife and MOVVIIE visited him in prison. It seemed that his wife could not stand this situation and finally decided to divorce Howen and bring MOVVIIE with her. Even so, Howen never forgot his son. While in prison, he still tried to communicate with his son by sending letters and always asking about MOVVIIE and his school progress. Meanwhile, at school, MOVVIIE often got bullied by his friends who blamed his father for the bridge incident. On that day, when MOVVIIE went home, he found a man who turned out to be his mother's new husband, and since then, they started moving from that house. Long story short, 7 years later, Howen finally got his freedom. He went home, but he did not find MOVVIIE and his ex-wife there. Not only that, Howen's arrival was rejected by the residents. They insulted him and thought that he was the cause of the failure of the bridge project, but even so, Howen was not discouraged, and he went to his ex-wife's new house. He hoped to meet with MOVVIIE, but apparently he couldn't meet his son because MOVVIIE had been sent to a boarding school. Soon bad news came. MOVVIIE was issued a dropout from school. Upon getting the news, they then went straight to school. It turned out MOVVIIE's school was the best and always ranked first in the province. During the morning ceremony, MOVVIIE was again scolded by the school principal, Mr. Yan, because he brought toys to school. It was not the first time he was scolded by Mr. Yan. In front of everyone, Mr. Yan finally made a big decision, namely that MOVVIIE would be expelled from the school. At that moment, MOVVIIE met again with his father, who had just been released from prison after 7 years. After the ceremony in Mr. Yan's office, MOVVIIE's mother begged Mr. Yan not to kick her son out of the school. She was even willing to accompany him to repeat 1 year of study, but Mr. Yan, who was very concerned with academic grades, did not change his mind to issue the dropout because he was considered unable to follow the lessons in class. To hear that decision, Howen was annoyed and immediately challenged Mr. Yan to bet, saying if MOVVIIE could rank in the top 10, then MOVVIIE had to stay in school. Hearing the bet, the principal immediately underestimated MOVVIIE and accepted the challenge. He promised to allow MOVVIIE to stay if he managed to get the top 10, but he would expel him if he failed. After school, MOVVIIE's mother kept scolding him. MOVVIIE was fed up and decided to stay with his father instead. After enjoying lunch, Howen decided to look for a job. Armed with his experience as an architect, he visited various workplaces with the hope that his experience so far could be an asset. MOVVIIE was sure that his father would easily get a new job, but apparently it was not. In the middle of the road, Howen met with Baliang, someone who used to also apply at his workplace but got rejected. He finally got a job as the head of the construction project, and because fate had turned around, he could finally take revenge by humiliating Howen in front of the crowd. After that, Howen kept trying to find a job, but unfortunately, the expected results never came. This condition forced MOVVIIE and his father to spend the night under a bridge. The next day, they met Baliang again. Baliang was seen venting his anger at his subordinates because they couldn't find the right point to put the dynamite. Howen witnessed the incident and introduced himself. He was willing to help solve the problem in just 2 minutes, but he firmly asked for a reward of 500 yuan in exchange for his help. Hearing the offer, Baliang instead raised his offer to 800 yuan if Howen managed to solve the problem. With his experience as an architect, Howen did the task with full confidence in less than 2 minutes. Seeing Howen's intelligence, Baliang then offered him a job, which he immediately agreed. After getting a job, Howen met his student, Detu. Howen asked for Detu's help to be able to return to his house. Detu decided to help, but with the condition that Howen had to design for him for free, and without thinking twice, Howen agreed, and thanks to Detu, Howen and MOVVIIE could return to their home. At home, MOVVIIE looked sad, then he apologized to his dad. He doubted that he would be able to get to the top 10 and would embarrass his father. Howen softly replied that not making the top 10 didn't matter, as it was nothing more than an empty threat to make sure MOVVIE didn't get kicked out of school. His father insisted that the most important thing was not the grades he got from school or what to do after that. His father's message seemed to give MOVVIE a new spirit to study seriously. MOVVIE felt his new life with his father was the happiest day of his life. After coming home from school, MOVVIE spent his time playing with kites and visiting various places that had influenced his father's life. MOVVIE began to realize that lessons that were initially boring had become interesting. He realized that the key to learning was finding an interest in something and not being forced. Meanwhile, his father was busy working with ballying and also helping decode with his design, but a few months later, there was a sudden economic crisis that affected their income. The workers, including Howen, had to struggle to find additional income by working on various other projects. One evening, one of MOVVIE's teachers named Xiao Gao went to MOVVIE's house and talked to his father. She reminded him about MOVVIE's academic grades, which had not shown any improvement. She expressed her worry about the bet Howen made a while ago because if MOVVIE failed, he would be expelled from school, but Howen replied calmly that his son had studied up late and spending time was also important because being forced to study was not the right solution. It would actually destroy the child's interest in learning. To hear those wise answers, Xiao Gao was amazed and realized the truth. After the meeting, Xiao Gao and Howen seemed getting closer and more interested in each other. The next day, Mr. Yan decided to supervise MOVVIE's class and would correct each of his assignments directly. He did that because he suspected Xiao Gao had helped MOVVIE and wanted to prove it. Meanwhile, Howen took MOVVIE to a meadow to help him who was having trouble writing an essay. Howen told him to feel the environment and write down what he felt and believed that was the first step in the writing process. Howen then hid to prank MOVVIE, but unfortunately, MOVVIE met a group of delinquents who approached him intending to beat him while looking for Howen. Knowing his son was in danger, Howen came out and stopped the delinquents while shouting at MOVVIE to run to escape from there. When MOVVIE arrived at school, he was greeted by Mr. Yan, who had been waiting in the classroom. Mr. Yan then checked the contents of MOVVIE's bag and found a toy airplane that was immediately thrown away from the top floor and destroyed. Mr. Yan reasoned that school was the place to study, not to play around. After school, MOVVIE found his father hurt. Seeing his father's condition, he felt almost like giving up and no longer wanted to pursue his dreams because he felt the burden of life he was experiencing was too heavy. But before his father could say anything, some residents suddenly came and wanted to kick them out from that house. Howen, who that day experienced a lot of problems, released his anger at them and shouted that he would not back down. That was the first time MOVVIE saw his father very angry. His father's words made him realize that life was hard, but retreat was never an option. The next day, Howen went to the company where he worked before. He wanted to clarify the unresolved bridge incident in the hope of clearing his name from all accusations. But unfortunately, instead of helping, the company actually didn't care at all and threw responsibility at each other. Because of that, Howen became emotional, and in the end, he was thrown out of there. After that, Howen met his son. He had gone through a lot that day and accidentally vented his anger at MOVVIE, who was busy talking about the airplane exhibition that he was going to visit. MOVVIE was shocked and ran away from there. Feeling guilty, Howen finally caught up with his son and apologized. As an apology, he was going to try to ask Xiao Gao for permission to take a 2-week vacation to watch an airplane exhibition, but he knew that his efforts might not be allowed, especially since Mr. Yan would ensure that students were not allowed out playing ahead of the final exam. Despite being hindered by many problems, MOVVIE and his father didn't lose their hope. When night fell, he sneaked out without Mr. Yan knowing. MOVVIE and Howen explored places they could only see on television before. They brought school books, and every night MOVVIE took the time to study while he spent the day traveling and learning new things that he didn't learn at school. Their trip ended at the airplane exhibition, but unfortunately, the entrance ticket had been sold out. Not wanting to see his son disappointed, Howen got an idea. He took MOVVIE to the hill not far from the exhibition location. From there, it turned out that they managed to witness the launch of the jet directly. After spending vacation time, it was time for MOVVIE and his father to go back home. To see his father, who was sound asleep, MOVVIE realized that all this time his father had worked harder for him. And to return the favor, he intended to buy instant noodles for his father, but unfortunately, when MOVVIE returned after buying noodles, he accidentally got on the wrong bus and got separated from his father. Unfortunately, there was a big storm coming at that time. Howen tried to find MOVVIE everywhere, but he couldn't find him while MOVVIE was in danger. He almost drowned in the flood, and the water level continued to rise. Finally, Howen borrowed a megaphone from one of the search teams who was evacuating residents. He shouted for MOVVIE and said that MOVVIE had to survive by looking things around and using his brain to survive. In the end, when the rescue team almost gave up and forced Howen to go to a safer place, MOVVIE suddenly appeared with a makeshift boat he managed to assemble. Thanks to MOVVIE's ingenuity, they managed to survive the storm and flee to a safe place. The next day, MOVVIE came to school in a hurry because it was the final exam. MOVVIE worked on the questions confidently and was sure he would succeed in getting the top 10. The announcement of the test scores finally came out. MOVVIE and his father were very enthusiastic to see the results, but fate said otherwise. MOVVIE did not manage to get the top 10 ranking. He was ranked 64th, and that was the lowest rank. They also had to accept reality, and in the end, they went home with a feeling of disappointment. MOVVIE had to move schools according to the promise that was agreed upon. When they almost left school, Xiaoguo came carrying MOVVIE's test results. The results showed that MOVVIE got a 0 from Mr. Yan, even though he was only 22 points short of being in 10th place. Howin got irritated and immediately went to meet Mr. Yan, who at that time was having guests from the Ministry of Education. Howin protested about the 0 grade his son received and asked that his essay be read again in front of guests from the Ministry of Education. Finally, they were given permission and MOVVIE started reading the essay. Even though it was not according to the theme, MOVVIE's essay had a very deep meaning about life and the learning process. After it was read, the guests from the Ministry of Education did an assessment separately, and after that, MOVVIE received an average score of 22.8, enough to get him to the top 10 of the entire class. This success was then celebrated by the students in a lively way. It tore textbooks and threw them into the air from the top of the school building. Howin criticized the way the principal taught the students as he was only concerned with grades. It could be seen from the expressions of the students who celebrated by throwing textbooks, proving that all the students there were not happy with the learning system that existed in the school. Mr. Yan tried to defend himself, saying that all the best students had succeeded and none failed, but Howin questioned the smartest student in the school. Howin revealed the fact that the once smartest student in the school was a madman who was often seen around the school. That man was Mr. Yan's son. Mr. Yan adopted him when he was 3 years old. He always excelled in his studies and always got first place in school, until one day the boy experienced difficulties for the first time in learning and his academic grades began to decline. Seeing that, Mr. Yan immediately punished him, instead of providing support. Due to this pressure and injustice, the boy fell into depression and began to suffer mentally. Seeing the condition of his adopted son, Mr. Yan no longer treated him well and instead disowned him. Hearing this story, Mr. Yan was silent and unable to say anything. He could only cry, feeling sorry for what he had done. Years later, MOVVIE had grown up and was preparing for his graduation exams. But at that time, he had been accepted into one of the aviation academies. Mr. Yan, who used to look down on him, now begged him not to move to the academy and to stay in that school so he could be the best graduate, but MOVVIE stuck to the principle taught by his father that everyone should do what they like. After school, MOVVIE was very happy and told the news to his father. As time went by, MOVVIE became a pilot and then advanced to be an astronaut, while his father had been together with Xiaoguo. One day, Howin was eating at a restaurant. He accidentally heard a conversation. It turned out that decode was the one who caused the collapse of the bridge at that time. Of course, this fact made his heart broken and beat decode. He then filed an appeal to the court. After that, he also visited MOVVIE, who would soon carry out his mission as an astronaut for the first time. At that moment, MOVVIE told his father that after he returned from his mission, he would handle his father's case to clear his name from all accusations. MOVVIE suggested his father let that bridge incident case go and that there was no need to file an appeal because it would have a negative impact on MOVVIE's career, considering he had become a public figure and the topic of conversation everywhere. The way MOVVIE said that was not rude, but it still hurt his father's feelings, and because of this, at the beginning scene, when MOVVIE was interviewed, his father didn't come. It was the reason for his absence at the event before MOVVIE departed. MOVVIE finally managed to take off and fly smoothly into the sky. All of MOVVIE's struggles so far paid off, and he managed to reach his dream of becoming an astronaut. Even though there were some problems on his first mission, he managed to overcome them and return to Earth safely. Not only the Chinese, but the whole world participated in celebrating the success of MOVVIE. On that day, his father also came to witness his son's success. At that time, MOVVIE apologized for his words that had hurt his father's feelings. They then laughed, reminiscing their time together when MOVVIE was little.